Ready, set, go!
Registration is now open for the Middle States Commission on Higher Education 2023 Annual Conference. It's in Philadelphia, December 4th through 6th, 2023, setting the standard transformation through accreditation. You don't want to miss it. Register now at msche.org.
Surprise!
We're taking the EdUp Experience podcast to Insights EDU. Join us for an incredible higher education marketing and enrollment management conference, February 20th to 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona. Register now at insightsedu.com and use promo code EdUp to save $50 off your registration. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio back here on another episode of the podcast. We keep these going, ladies and gents, and we'll never stop. I say that on a lot of these opening podcast episodes, but as Elvin Freitas, of course, co-founder of the EdUp Experience, starts booking me into late January, I can continue to say that we won't stop because we literally will not. I want to just take a minute, and if you have not yet checked out Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education. I can promise you are missing something, because we interviewed 125 college and university presidents and put their insights about the future of higher education into a book. And I can tell you that some of the things that they said are literally coming true. And I'm watching it happen in real time. And I go, oh yeah, so-and-so said that. It's in the book. They also said this. And if you want to know what this is, well, you can pick up a copy of the book and look for yourself and read for yourself. And I want to mention, and this kind of all ties together very nicely, that if you didn't know, the EdUp Experience podcast, well, we podcast live, and we podcast at conferences across the country. And in fact, one coming up that I can tell you I am very excited about is something called Insights 2024, Insights EDU 2024. That's through Education Dynamics. And it just happens that I have somebody with me here today. You'll start to hear her more as these episodes roll on, because I think we've got her a bunch of times co-hosting. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest co-host, she's Tracy Krackemeyer. She's the Chief Relationship Officer at Education Dynamics, aka Eddie. What's going on, Tracy?
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having us here. We're really excited to be a part of this and to have you at Insights EDU with us in Phoenix in February.
Oh, we're excited. Tracy, true or false, we've known each other for like 15 years or more.
True. We have known each other for
a really long
2
time.
Decades. Yeah.
Yeah, a really long time. In fact, going back to the old for-profit days in higher education, Tracy worked at a company that I intersected with a lot, that was out of Kansas City, called KeyPath, right? It was KeyPath, and then it was Throughline.
And then it was Throughline. It started as Platform. Yes.
Platform, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
So, for those of you that listen, because I know there are many of you that started and got your cut your teeth in for-profit higher education, you probably have intersected with either me or Tracy, or me and Tracy at very different times through CQ or other departments. Shout out to all of those that cut their teeth in for-profits, now supporting nonprofit higher education institutions like Tracy and I do on a daily basis. Tracy, it's always an honor to have somebody here that came from a similar background in higher ed. How's your journey been? And you and I have never really sat. I should probably interview you at some point, but talk about your journey in higher ed and how you got to this point in Education Dynamics real fast.
Yeah, so I have been working in higher education marketing and enrollment management for 23 years. Now, started in 2000, again, working with the for-profits and really fell in love with the business, and because of all of the students that we've been able to help. And fundamentally, helping someone change their lives through education is something that I hold near and dear to my heart. And so we started off really as a marketing services firm, advertising agency, because back in the day we were doing television and newspaper placement, if we can even remember that.
Wow.
And then have continued to evolve into a lot of organic search marketing, paid search, nurturing, and enrollment coaching. And now at Education Dynamics, we are a full service enrollment marketing and recruitment organization where we are working with a variety for-profit, not-for-profit, and public universities across the gamut of things, whether that's market research, doing marketing on their behalf, doing the enrollment management services, and get to work with a lot of fine folks that are probably listening today.
Well, and of course, this I wanted to point out that you and I knew each other long before Education Dynamics, but Lindenwood University, where I work as the Chief Experience Officer, we use Education Dynamics for a lot of our marketing needs. And I went and specifically found Tracy because I was like, I know all the people you know, so I know the service is going to be good for me. So it's worked out very well. We've got a great partnership, and I know you're passionate about helping people, and that's really a great foundation for moving into our conversation today, because the gentleman we're going to talk to is also helping people in very different ways, which is going to make this a really interesting podcast episode. And I'm going to bring him in right now. Ladies and gentlemen, he's Chris Morett. He is the president of Cohere Campus, and he is a campus workplace, sorry, and he is the inventor of the faculty approachability project. I think I got that all right. Chris, you got a lot going on. I don't even know how you keep straight.
I don't. No, I try, and each day is a new thing. And I think a skill I've had to develop, and probably most people have, is just when to limit yourself and to not do all the things you want to do, and just focus on a few things that you're doing now. And it's a constant battle, I think, for probably you too as well. There's so much out there to think about, but you just can't spend all your time pursuing them.
And by the way, I want to say Dr. Chris Morett. I forgot Dr. Per, but you earned it, so you got to say it at least at the intro, right? By the way, you got your doctorate for the University of Albany. I was just in Albany last week.
Wow, and I heard
at SUNY Oneonta, where I am got my undergraduate degree. So I drove from Oneonta to Albany. How do you like that?
Wow, and I picked that up in listening to some episodes that we were fellow SUNY grads. So a good club indeed, and I hope you had a good time in the capital region.
I did. Well, Chris, I got to tell you, here's how this episode's going to go today.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions, and I want to have them answered immediately.
Just to prep things. That's typically how we like to do it here. But I want to ask you first, because, what I like about you, Chris, is you started the Faculty Approachability Project. And you called me and you said, Joe, I got something cool here. I'd like to bring it to the EdUp experience. And I love to interview innovators, and I love to interview people who are starting a business, because that wasn't long ago that nobody listened to the EdUp Experience podcast, so we all have to start somewhere. Can you talk about the Faculty Approachability Project? What is it first? Let's start there before we go to Cohere.
Sure thing. So I was working at Rutgers University, and this goes back, I'll say, certainly pre-pandemic, maybe even back eight years. The topic of faculty approachability is not brand new, but I was doing a lot of thinking about it, in part in the context of active learning, which I had a role in promoting and supporting while at Rutgers. And I knew one person really in particular who was very approachable. He was engaged with the students. He cared. He was experimenting with his pedagogy, and he just was this just great person, teacher, mentor. You could tell. And I thought, but some of it was by force of his personality and by force of his clear interest and his approachability. And I thought, well, not everybody, his name is John Kerrigan, I should quote him by name. Not everybody is John, right? How do you try to foment that faculty student engagement and approachability in different situations? And also, how do you do it at scale? And how do you manage it? Because if you have a 200-person class or even a 50-person class, you can't engage with all of them sort of in depth in a given semester.
So I have three kind of core tenets of my leadership philosophy, and approachability is the first, right? Because if you aren't approachable as a person, you can't project approachability, then people will literally not come to you, and then they infer, and then they become uncertain. And when you do those things, it creates a toxic workplace, I think. So I'm all, it's like when you get up in the morning, I've got an 8-year-old and now a 6-year-old. It's like, you know what? I'm picking up Cheerios off the ground too, just like you. It happens. That's an important part of being in faculty, is because there's so many, and because our approach is sage on the stage, or at least that's how higher ed has been delivered over so long. You've always had this sort of vaunted, faculty role, but really faculty are people too. It's you gotta feel free to go and talk to your faculty member. There's a key gap that has to be filled there, don't you think?
I agree. And I think that most faculty, because we're just humans who grew up and made the decision, wise or not, to go all the way to get our terminal degree in many cases, we're just people. But there's the power imbalance. If it's a traditional age student, which it isn't always, but there's an age difference. So many forces pushing against approachability, and it's easy to not realize it. It's very easy to not realize it as a faculty member. But I do agree with you that we need to address that. And I think the reason the Faculty Approachability Project went from an idea into a project, the short version is, I think most universities do not have an institutional level explicit plan or awareness of how approachable their faculty are, or of faculty student engagement. And they can say, we have a research program that brings undergrads together with faculty, we have a seminar program, but it's like institutionally from the vantage point of a student. And I love that your job has now got the title or the expanded role and title of experience officer. There's not a lot of attention, I think, paid to what does the average student experience when it comes to how they see their faculty and how they interact with their faculty. And because you could say, we have this program, we have that program, we have this person, we're doing more active learning, and that's great, but are the same students in all 4 of those programs and the other 80% are not? I think the problem is that schools don't know. And what I decided to do was, as we came out of the pandemic, there was so much conversation about student mental health, student well-being, and what's the point of coming to campus now? The campus has to earn its place, right? And then there started to be this conversation just last year, more and more, about what the role of the faculty was in that. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to get scooped. I better start this project formally. So I did. And I really think through the toolkit, which is free, through my LinkedIn Live episodes, which are free, also workshops that I'm mounting now that are not quite free, but pretty accessible, accessibly priced, to just say, here are some things you can do that are discrete, that are plausible. Pick 1 or 2 and do them. Try to measure it in broad brushstrokes. It's just so doable. And I hope that the toolkit, between the awareness and some of the tips, are helpful to universities.
Tell them like it is.
I love that, Tracy, because a big part of this, as you're talking about approachability, is almost branding. It's like personal branding and bringing in the whole marketing aspect of this. Not only just branding yourself, but then the university itself, right? Because I know you get how many people walk away from a faculty member and go, oh, you don't want to go to that university. There's a so-and-so there that, you don't want to get. So all of it rolls up into how we portray ourselves. Over to you.
Absolutely. And just even, we were able to do some student focus groups over the course of the last couple of weeks. And one of the things that they have the tendency to do is really talk about their tie to faculty, to their enrollment advisor on the front end. And that is what endears them, or not, if it's a bad experience, to the college or university. And so it's a critical piece.
And Tracy, to your point, I'm wondering if I know some admissions folks where getting faculty to come out to a admitted students day can be difficult. And that's, I think, to just repeat what you said, what a lot of students want.
Yeah, and
Tracy,
truly to understand. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you to add, because you guys do your research. You do it both from a traditional and online. You have the student reports that you put out. And typically, quality, educational program quality or faculty, they're way high up on the list. I mean, is this really, when you get down to brass tacks, that the student identifies with faculty? Like, that's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah, I mean, once they've decided what their program of interest is, what type of learning they're wanting to do, is that ground, is that online, is that hybrid, and then wanting to feel, what that experience is going to be like. And a big part of that is the connection to the faculty and who they are going to be learning from. And even, in terms of, selling the program, I know that's a very loaded and difficult term to have, but, utilizing, even in the online world, some of the faculty to bring them into an open house night or different things where you're doing a webinar so they can learn a little bit about what it's going to be like, is a huge selling point, and really helps bring that student across the finish line.
What do you think about that, Chris? So, and is this, I guess the bigger question for you is, what's discussed as a part of the faculty approachability project? How is it structured? What's the engagement look like? Is it faculty engaging with other faculty about how they engage students and how they become more approachable?
Sure. And I think to Tracy's point, I think she's right about the importance of faculty. And if, we all are in the business, as we should be, of understanding how our industry can improve. How can higher ed improve? I don't think any of us wants to say that it's broken in all ways, right? And to dive into the other end of the spectrum, which is you don't need to go to college. But in that space where we're looking for improvement and innovation, and as any good industry does, what, from the perspective of a department, why are they going to take our major, right? If you're engineering, you're not asking that question. Maybe if you're computer science, you're not asking that question. If you're English, history, French, if your school hasn't cut that, who's going to come to our major?
I don't know.
Très bien. And, you want majors. You want to sell your major. You do, or you might not exist. So I think that I love the word selling. And, we don't mean money necessarily, but we mean existence. So I think that the Faculty Approachability Project, and this is both a strength and in some ways a barrier, it's very holistic. So approachability is both, I like to say that it's an action, right? It's what gets students. You do want faculty to be approachable, because that student, if you have an approachable faculty member, even if you never talk to them, you feel like you belong, you feel comfortable, right? Especially if you come from, whether it's a background or have, whether it's neurodivergent, you just feel like you're in a place that's welcoming broadly. But when it comes to the actual approach of students to faculty, there are so many things that can shape it. And it can be faculty affect, it can be the size of the course, it can be pedagogy. Where's your office? What's your office designed like? Or maybe you have office hours somewhere else. And what's your course size, if I didn't say that already? So it's very cross-cutting, which I think is important. But as I've done the project and certainly gotten, I'd say, positive attention, and it was covered inside higher ed, sometimes if it's cross-cutting, then there's no single person at the university who's like, oh, well, that's my job to do that. So what I've done along the way to sort of augment what I've been doing is to say, well, who are the people in a university who might be responsible for this? And the answer is often not clear, right? It could be a dean or a dean's office, but also focusing on faculty development or instructional designers or centers for teaching and learning. Because I don't mean to put it on the faculty, right? My point is it's a holistic thing. But to the extent that faculty can shape some of these things, like their pedagogy, I am targeting them to some extent. And then the last group I'm targeting is students, a student group, a Greek organization, to say, hey, how about a workshop where you pull in some faculty, you get the students together with them, and maybe you all just build some community, or maybe kind of for fun, but maybe for future benefit, you come up with a strategy for your institution, right? Where it goes beyond that is a bonus, but it can be what you end up communing about.
Tracy, to connect the dots here a little bit and show the through line, you like that, if you will.
Well done.
we talk a lot, you and I, and in marketing, we talk a lot about personalization. Is personalization moving to individualization? And we talk about that in marketing all the time, where the student needs to be spoken to in some way that motivates them. That isn't the through line, or is that through line carrying through? So I'd like you to talk about, Tracy, if you would, what are we seeing in the front end, marketing, enrollment, and as a student progresses to come into a university, what level of individualization are they expecting? And Chris, are you seeing that carry through to faculty? I want to throw that whole through line down and say, is it expected now? So what do you think?
Yeah, so a lot of what we're continuing to see is that everybody wants to be as self-service as possible. They want to have all of this information at their fingertips and to be able to digest it as much as they can. But then the second that they can't, they want to be able to interact with someone else. And so obviously technology has been amazing and a great implementation to answering easy and commonly asked questions with chatbots and FAQs, and having, the simple type of text and such. But then if a student runs into, or a prospective student runs into well, I have like a real question about this, and understanding how does a tuition hour rate equate into what will my tuition be, or or anything that they could run into. They want to be able to talk with somebody, and it's on their own terms. And so as you were talking, Chris, I was it's interesting, the ideas of office hours and different things. Like, what does that communication look like now with today's student that wants to text and not talk? And in some cases, like, showing up in person is just like sounds like a big hurdle. Yes.
Yeah, and there are some faculty offices that are at the very end of a labyrinthine, subterranean hallway, and people aren't going to, if they can find it, they might not go in. Or I think of little things like, I remember I went to office hours once, and it was a prof I didn't know. It was somebody whose course I was thinking about taking, and the door was cracked, and I'm like, do I knock?
Execute Order 66.
So what happens when you go in that door?
I pulled out my lightsaber, and as instructed. No, and so he was great. He was wonderful. He was such a lovely guy, and he taught like sort of an arcane course, like a Renaissance history or something like that. And he probably spoke Italian and Latin, but he was great. But I also think that's me, and I'm not saying I am like preternaturally intrepid, but my dad sold insurance. I can talk. I feel relatively comfortable talking to strangers, and some of it, sometimes you feel nervous, but it's like, I'm just going to do it. We're all the same. But maybe that's because of my own background. Maybe it's because of my race and gender, which are not minoritized. And there are some people who would never do that. They would never go to office hours. And if the door was not wide open with somebody like pulling you in from the hallway with a hook, not happening. So I don't mean to belabor that detail, but to your point, Tracy, I think there are all these barriers. And so whether it's for convenience, whether it's a student who, let's say, when we're talking on campus students here, right? Students who come to campus at least once a week, they're caregiving, they don't have time to go. And so I think you have to provide all modalities. And one thing I want to play around with is this idea of having, I'll just say it on your show. Maybe nobody will scoop me. What if you have office hours in the metaverse? Just play around with it. Just do it. So that's a big yes, Tracy, to thinking hard about the different forms. And I think, if I had to say one thing, it'd be provide choice for people.
Should you register for the Middle States Commission on Higher Education annual conference this December 4th through 6th in Philadelphia?
100%.
I agree, because the title of the conference is called Setting the Standard, Transformation Through Accreditation. There is no time like the present to explore opportunities in higher education and the future for our students and our business model. Get out and network with your peers this December 4th through 6th at the Middle States Commission on Higher Education Annual Conference.
Attention.
Are you ready to elevate your institution's marketing and enrollment strategies? Join the EdUp Experience podcast at the Insights EDU Conference, February 20th to 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona. Don't miss out on this opportunity to hear from engaging speakers from industry-leading companies like Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, and higher ed leaders. Learn the latest marketing and enrollment strategies to grow your programs. Register now at insightsedu.com and use promo code EdUp to save $50 off your registration.
Attention.
It's really interesting that you bring up, because when you were talking about I don't remember what you just said, like the dungeness, hallway that's dimly lit. It's the white painted cinder blocks, and there's this door half, cracked open. If you're a student and you make it that far, which a lot of times you won't make it that far, who do you expect that comes out from that door, right? Is it Milton in the with his red stapler going, who is it that's down there? You start to paint this picture of a very mean person who gets stuck in the basement, and it could just be where an amazing faculty member is, because that's where the physical space was available. So I hear you saying, going back to Cohere and everything that you're doing with physical space, in reimagining it, that where you put faculty can have is there any direct correlation to approachability, right? That more accessible space means more people will go there. If it's sunny and it's got soft seating, more people will sit there. If it's dark and cloudy, nobody will go down there. I mean, is it that simple?
I think that's part of it. And, when you're like the three of us in a role where you're dealing at the enterprise level, you always hesitate to claim that there's any one thing that will answer all issues. But no, I think clearly the location of the space, the design of the space, it really matters. And so two upshots of that. One is, and this is all so simple. Think about where you will be hosting somebody, right? I mean, this is kindergarten level. Where will you be hosting someone? Let's think about that. What's it like to get there, and what's it like to go in, and what's it like to be there? And if you're a dean or a student success VP, or maybe enrollment management, who, hopefully is talking to the school, because, they're supposed to be getting people in the door. Is there any effort to tell faculty who are crazy busy and who, let's say, shouldn't be thinking of this because they weren't trained to just say, in the 0.2 free seconds you have this week, think about where your office hours are. We're going to make our conference room available. A quick email. Our conference room is available at these hours. Please use it for office hours. That's not hard, but I bet, I don't know, who does that? 5% of departments, 10, So yeah, I think the space where it is and like what it's like when you get there are so important. And there's levers that are just so easy to be pulled. And even meeting out in a student center or in a food court. And of course there's privacy and all that stuff you need to think about. And then, loud spaces are not good for some. I don't like loud background noise. But maybe have it at the food court in the little cubby space by Chick-fil-A. And for some students, that is the difference between accessing the help that's going to keep them from failing and not. So I'll stop there. I know my answers are a bit on the longer side, but you're hitting such deep points that have so much context to them.
No, it's important stuff. Tracy, go ahead.
Well, one of the points that you brought up earlier, which I think is really interesting, is that there's really no consistent place where it's owned. And where do you think it works best when it comes to ownership of the faculty accessibility?
Yeah.
It's fuzzy math.
It is. It's very fuzzy. I think that as I was starting the project and deciding what to name it, I talked to a friend who's a history prof, and she sort of questioned the use of the word approachability. She said it was gendered, and I appreciated that. And in the end, I decided to maybe try to reclaim the word. But I think in general, I don't want to put too much on faculty. So that's my first answer to your question. Not to put too much on them, not to make this some unfunded mandate, so to speak, for faculty to just have to do. Even if at some point they need to be looped in, right? They've got to be a party to where their office hours are being held and when they're being held. But who to drive it, I think, is complicated. Who sees themselves and who has the authority to either suggest it, or maybe you can recommend, and Joe, you may have, power of persuasion is strong. Even if folks don't report to you, you can do the power of persuasion. You can build capacity. So, Tracy, I think my answer to your question would be, I do think at the level of the chancellor or the dean, they could, hey, they can go look at the toolkit at facultyapproachabilityproject.com, pick two things, and your next, whether it's department meeting, school meeting of chairs, just say, hey, here's a 20-second task I'd like you to do. Send this email to your faculty to suggest this. Or so it's deans. And then I do think centers for teaching and learning, because not to bring it too much back to faculty, but they really can make a difference. Those would be two. But that's a great question. And part of the problem with higher ed is that everything is so connected, but our organizations are not structured that way. And I think I love this job, like chief connection officer at a university. Like, your job is to just go start connecting, just make 2 connections a day. That's your metric. Doesn't matter how big or small or in what area. Go connect 2 things for a little bit of time.
I like that. That's actually really good advice for me and my job as chief experience officer at Lindenwood, because I kind of fashion it like that. Like, I need to know everyone. I need to know how they interact, when they interact, and I need to understand the gaps so that I can advise how to fill them, right? And you think about faculty, and it's just because we label somebody who interacts with a customer, whether you think that or not, as faculty, doesn't mean that that person is absolved from maintaining this sales relationship. I hate to bring it down to that level, but if you look at any other business, any other employee that interacts with a customer, same thing with higher ed, has the capacity to dissolve or enhance the relationship between the customer and the institution. And that plays out in something called retention, right? If you have, you could have the best student service in the world. You could have the best marketing in the world, the best enrollment process in the world. And that one faculty interaction in that one class on the first week or the 8th week, it doesn't matter, makes a student go, forget this, right? So the faculty are ultimately, whether they're measured that way or not, the ultimate driver of student retention, right? Because the students go to them with the problems. Whether the faculty is equipped to handle them or not is a whole nother story, but they go to them with their problems. They tell them their intimate secrets, but sometimes they tell them their troubles. Sometimes they don't. And that's where approachability comes in, is you have a better chance to keep your customer, to keep your student going to school, the more you know about them, if you want to know more about them. And that's all tied together in how we retain students, and the faculty play the biggest, if not the biggest, one of the most important roles in retaining students in class, right? And I always think of it like when you're when Tracy, and you remember this, when for-profit, Ed, when we were in the for-profits, and you had starts that would happen very frequently, and you would walk a student around into a class, and it would be like a day or 2 late, and you'd walk the student in and say, Tracy's going to start late this week, and the faculty member would go, I'm not taking any late students. That was the end of that, right? So it's all in the delivery. If we all believe that our job is retention, do you think, getting to my really long-winded series of pontificating to a question, do you think faculty in general, Chris, understand their role in retention? Is that a thought? And is that included in the Approachability Project?
Sure. And I don't have a problem with the word customer. I mean, to me, I'd say there's no single word that works perfectly, right? And but no one in their right mind, whatever words you use, would disagree that you want that student to stay in that institute, have an experience that makes them stay in the institution, that going from choosing the right one to begin with to having good experiences. And I'll pontificate back, but I'll try to keep it short. And just like you can have some professors who sort of they're in a school, great student services, et cetera, but they don't do their part. You could have the opposite, right? Where the school is iffy, but you have one or two profs who just, they're your guardian angel, or they express a little bit of empathy.
Nailed it.
So I agree the faculty are huge there. I'm putting up one finger. I'm putting up a second finger that there are things they can do even at scale that help. And maybe it's a smile. Maybe it's, and I'll tell you the story. Talk about a mistake you made once. Like, that's groundbreaking to a little 18-year-old. Maybe it's a student who's shy, or they didn't have a lot of experience in high school with like model Congress or something, right? And there's this prof who's a PhD, and they're an adult, and they made this dumb mistake once. So there's so much they can do. Now, the faculty see themselves in that role, and do they then act on it? And I think more can, and more should, which is why I did the project.
I love it. Tracy, do you have any final questions for Chris as we get down to what I will ask him as the final two?
I don't.
It's good. It's good stuff, though, Chris. I to your point of belonging too, I mean, there's a whole nother conversation there. And if you're talking about belonging on campus, how you design space, how you interact with students within that space, whether you make a space or that engages somebody, that they even feel like they want to be belong. There's so much there in the work you're doing with Cohere and workplace redesign that goes beyond just physical workspace. It's all in the psychological, isn't it? I mean, that's really where belonging comes in.
It really is.
Comment on that real fast?
Sure. And I'll harken back to your episode you did with Margaret McMenamin, who's the president of Union College. And that's the community college in my area. That's where I go to early vote. So I heard her and you talk about, student coming onto campus. You want someone to say hi to them, right? And sort of, it was this example of what you just said, of them feeling welcome. And as people are talking about more now, to be relentlessly welcoming, relentlessly inviting. So I do think that it is about getting that student to feel just a little bit more at home. And so that's number one. Number two, how do you do that? I like to say that space isn't just an asset to be managed. It's a tool to be wielded. Yes, you have to keep it cool or warm and clean and mold free, which is a challenge at large universities.
In some spaces, yes, that's true.
But how, if your goal, let's say, is a student to feel, to have a relationship with somebody, you have certain tools you can use to push that. And one is space. One is your digital outreach. One is the personnel. What's the reception area look like at your counseling center? What's the front door look like? Am I going to walk into a support group? Or am I going to, I don't know, because if it's a big wooden door, then that's a problem. So to me, space is a tool, along with others in this ecosystem, is meant to, yes, to your question, create a sensation, an experience that just nudges the student into a place where they're ready to maybe do well in school, to grow as a person, and to have a college experience, whether it's 3 years, to mention a previous episode of yours, or 6 years, that's worth it.
It all comes back to this. It's so important because students are way more transient now because of better transferability reviews. You can go anywhere in the world online if you didn't like your physical experience. I mean, there's so many options that every interaction we do should be built around keeping a student, because sometimes it doesn't take much to create that trigger where they go, you know what, I'm going to look down the street, or I'm going to look in Washington State and I'm in Florida. You know, I mean, there's just so many ways a student could get served. But Chris, you're kind of at the front end of this now, because you know, so much happened through COVID and all the changes. It's like we get down to brass tacks, and it's all about who's teaching the student, right? That is where the lifeblood of an institution is always its faculty, and you know that's something that will never change, because we're always trying to hire great faculty. I don't think there's an institution out there that goes, you know what, I'm going to hire marginal faculty, or, you know, I'd like average faculty. I'd really like to go more average than great.
Right. We're aiming for like a 5.5.
Yeah. If we just get middle of the road faculty, we're doing great. Tell me anything else you want to say about Cohere, anything else you want to say about the Faculty Approachability Project. Get an open mic for a couple of minutes. Take it.
Sure. I think you're right. In the end, we're humans. And as a recent guest on my show, Susan Rock said, and she's a heads up a Center for Teaching and Learning, and she's an English prof at Columbus State in Georgia. We're not just humans, we're animals, right? And that student goes in and is very receptive to these human, or even you would say animalistic, right? Like status and physicality. And so the faculty they're the frontline workers, right? Faculty, whatever else you say, they may be brilliant scholars, they are frontline workers. And your frontline workers have the power to do a lot. So that's one way of answering it. And then to just focus on, let's say, inclusive space. And I was at a conference this summer on a panel of the American Association of Law Libraries, and we were talking about inclusion, or, you know, equity in space. I think the design field, architects have gotten better at trying to design with the end user really in mind, and with inclusion really in mind. But I would also argue that campuses and workplaces still have some improvement at their fingertips by defining concepts more closely and by measuring them. And what I've come up with a methodology with a colleague at a university, a rubric to say, let's break down the different aspects of inclusion, the different things that will make a student more or less likely to, whether it's walk into an office or to engage with them online, and to break them down and to see what the room for improvement is. And so for me, it's not to claim that you can be totally precise. It's nebulous. But what does inclusion mean? Is it a sensation? Is it a behavior? Do you look at how different factors affect different students and then try to measure it in some way? And we're not calculating like the reentry of the lunar module into the atmosphere, but we're just coming up with ideas and specificity so that we can act. Because space that is meant to be inclusive is great, but it can't stop at a photo shoot where the people in that space are from Central Casting. One from all nations. It's got to be, no, everyone on this campus is equally likely to use this space if they need it. And that comes with measurement, to be honest, I believe. And then you can work against something, you can improve against something. And that's what I'm trying to do with universities. It's both simple, but also profound, because I don't think it's being done at the moment very widely.
What do you see for the future of higher education, Dr. Morett?
I believe that there still is some logic to getting what we would call a degree as soon after high school as you can. You're the most academically oriented then. If your caregiving responsibilities tend to increase over time, again, these are generalizations. Sometimes you use what you have and you innovate if you need to, but if it's sort of satisficing, then you push it forward. So I don't think we're going to see like the demise of all campuses. But I do, and that'll maybe be a plurality of the way that people get their college education. But to me, and I really care about civic education, and you know, like if you don't have a political stability in your country, then all other outcomes are out the window. So I'd like to see a dose more conversation about like people being educated and being good voters. And I think college is one of the places in our society that we can push for that. But I also see, the beginnings of, or more than just the beginnings of this dynamic, interaction between work and education that I think hopefully will breed different forms. And I'll just say one thing about that. And I'd like to introduce this into the dialogue if it hasn't been already. There are skills, we talk about life skills, career skills, vocational skills. How about short-term and long-term? College is where you go for your long-term skills, self-awareness, adaptability, some basic reading and writing. But these other job skills, like those are more and more short-term, especially with AI. And so maybe we say, listen, college is not, in some ways, your vocational training for your whole life. We have to explicitly structure in along the way these experiences that are going to prepare you for a situation that was unpredictable 3 years ago. And so, but it doesn't have to prepare you for 10 years from now. We're just preparing for each 2 years of our lives, right, on a vocational level. And I think that suggests a different form of education, a different need for credentials. Maybe it's just training programs more specifically, whether they're given by the company or not, pegged to a given job. And yes, they have a short shelf life, but that's okay. So I think a reconceptualization of short-term and long-term, and then you layer the education system on top of that. I hope that was clear. Maybe you can edit it out if it wasn't. But to me, that's what I see as one of the guiding sort of principles.
I think that's very smart, and it'd be interesting to talk to people about that. Maybe I'll ask everybody that going forward and how they think. But we all are receiving some type of education along the way, and somebody that received an education in podcasting today, of course, was my guest co-host, ladies and gentlemen, Tracy Krackemeyer. Made me laugh at myself, Tracy. She's Chief Relationship Officer at Education Dynamics. Tracy, how'd you feel about your first co-hosting gig at the EdUp Experience?
I really enjoyed it. It was wonderful to meet you, Chris. And I feel like I need to do some upskilling in my abilities. Which
short-term or long-term, you're going to have to decide which one now.
Exactly.
How you're going to go. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, he's Dr. Chris Morett. He is the president of Cohere Campus Workspace and founder of the Faculty Approachability Project, which you can see and find out more about where, Chris?
So it is a LinkedIn page, Faculty Approachability Project, and there's a website, long but eponymous and memorable, www.facultyapproachabilityproject.com.
Chris, how'd you feel about your visit here at the EdUp Experience?
I till my final day will probably go on a little too long, so I hope I didn't do that too much here. But I did hope I conveyed that, I'm an optimist, that institutions with a little self-reflection and maybe more chief experience officers can move to a place where they're more responsive to their, what do they call them, students, stakeholders, customers, peeps, citizens, Jedi. I think there's room, and forget perfection. Let's all just move in the right direction. And I really am an optimist.
Well, we're moving in the right direction here at the EdUp Experience podcast as Tracy comes to co-host and Chris comes to be our guest. With that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.
Oh, yeah.
The Middle States Commission on Higher Education 2023 Annual Conference is in Philadelphia, December 4th through 6th. Setting the standard, transformation through accreditation. Remember, only you can create transformation through networking, knowledge sharing, opportunity, leadership, service, learning, and accreditation. And you'll do all those things at the Middle States Commission on Higher Education Annual Conference this December 4th through 6th. Can't wait to be there. EdUp will be there. There's going to be over 1,300 attendees, presidents, provosts. The networking opportunities are off the chain. Register now at msche.org.
Oh, yeah.
Attention higher ed marketing and enrollment management professionals. We are taking the EdUp Experience podcast to Insights EDU. Join us at Insights EDU on February 20th to 22nd, 2024 in Phoenix, Arizona. Gain insight into the latest higher education trends and cutting-edge marketing strategies that'll take your institution's enrollment to a whole new level. This is your opportunity to connect with higher education leaders and marketing experts from across the country. Comprehensive presentations, engaging panel discussions, and more. Insights EDU will equip you to position your institution for growth. Register now at insightsedu.com and use the code EDUP to save $50 off your registration. Can you afford to miss this conference?
I don't think so.